Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Carter Huggins commemorative ceremony that is being hosted and sponsored by the UCLA Academic Advancement Program. My name is Charles Alexander. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Student Diversity and Director of the Academic Advancement Program here at UCLA. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be able to host and put on this event for our community today. And I assure you that you will enjoy the program as we proceed with the agenda today. As you all know, 22 years ago, tragedy struck UCLA in the form of the murders of John Huggins and Alprentice Bunchy Carter. And we are here to commemorate their life and to share messages and just to present uh, a program that will honor them in the way that they should be. So without further ado, because I do want to make sure we stay on time, I'd like to introduce to you our first presenter, Chancellor of the University of California here at Los Angeles, Gene Block.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander, and hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My special thanks to ASU, the Academic Advancement Program, and Ericka Huggins and Elaine Brown for joining us today. Even in the midst of a pandemic that we're all struggling with, I'm grateful that we can come together, at least virtually, to honor the lives and mourn the losses of Alprentice, Bunchy Carter, and John Huggins. We honor who these men were as people, as students in the High Potential program, and as activists who pushed for opportunity and dignity for Black Americans in this city and beyond. We also mourn the loss of who they would have continued to grow into as individuals, friends, family members, thinkers, and leaders. In reflecting on the legacies of Carter and Huggins, we celebrate the activism of their generation for bringing change to the world and to our campus. For instance, helping bringing us the Academic Advancement Program, which is celebrating 50 years of serving the community, and the Afro-American Center, now known as the Bunch Center for African American Studies. We also honor the ways in which they've continued to inspire Bruins for the past 5 decades to stand up, to speak out, to advocate, to campaign, to lean into controversial issues, and to look for injustices and seek to right them. This kind of active and engaged civic life is needed now more than ever. We know that the world is still not one in which all people, regardless of race, receive the compassion, freedom, respect, and dignity that they deserve. It is a world in which anti-Black racism remains a powerful force in American life. A world in which there remain racial disparities in economic status, healthcare, educational opportunities, criminal justice, employment, and more. Given the continued killings of unarmed Black men and women, it is one in which Black lives are still sadly devalued by far too many. As we look back at the work and the lives of Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, we can see that the world they hoped for has not, despite the monumental efforts of Black activists and their allies, been fully realized. One of the best ways to honor their memories is to recommit ourselves to achieving genuine equity and ending racism and bigotry in all its forms. I know that this commitment is shared by ASU and other student groups and by our faculty and staff. I share it too, and it was one of the reasons that UCLA took a number of actions this past summer aimed at promoting racial justice on our campus and better supporting our Black intellectual community. Many of you helped create or are partners in those efforts, and I'm grateful for that. I look forward to working alongside you to continue to make UCLA a force for justice. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins did not live to see a world in which every person enjoys the same freedoms and is treated with the same level of respect, compassion, and dignity. That's the world we all deserve, and it remains a world we must all strive to create together. I want to thank you, and now I'll turn it back to Dr. Alexander.
Thank you, Chancellor Block. I stand corrected. It was 52 years ago that this incident occurred. I want to also mention that, as Chancellor Block did mention as well, the 50th anniversary of AAP, and we'll be celebrating throughout the entire year. And this we consider our kickoff event for the 50th anniversary of the Academic Advancement Program here at UCLA. I'd like to share a treat with you. We have a special message from Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, who could not be with us today and wanted to, but sends along this special message for us to share.
Hi, I'm Assemblymember Shirley Weber representing the 79th Assembly District in San Diego. But equally important, I am a Bruin. I have 3 degrees from UCLA, and I'm honored that you would have me be here with you during this very important time. You know, it's been years since I was a student at UCLA, and I reflect on my bachelor's degree that took place probably 50 years ago in 1970. But also what happened that same year was I became a fellow in the Graduate Advancement Program, the GAP program, that made a tremendous difference in my life and so many others who became graduate students supported by the university with high expectations that we would go out and change the world. And for me, a first-generation college student, it was amazing. When I decided to get a PhD, I told it to my dad. I said, they want me to go and get a PhD after I got my master's. And he said, what is that? And I said, Dad, that's the highest degree you can get in an academic institution. And he said, let's go get it. So I gave all I had in order to make sure that my dad and my family understood how grateful I was to be the first generation college student, to come out of an environment in Hope, Arkansas, where discrimination was clearly the rule of the day, and where my father escaped being lynched in Hope, Arkansas, to bring his 7 children at the time to California. I am honored to be one of those children, and I'm very honored to be here with you tonight. And since that time, I've tried to make good on my promise to California, my promise to the legacy of my forefathers who stood up so strong for me in so many different ways. And as a part of that, I became not only a professor at the university for 40 years and the founder of Africana Studies, but I also now am a legislator who has taken on some of the greatest challenges. I took on the challenge of reparations, and we passed the reparations bill. I've taken on the challenge of changing the use of lethal force in California, and so we had the largest lethal force bill in terms of the most restrictions by officers of the use of lethal force. And this year, we began a bill that was passed and signed by the governor that makes ethnic studies a requirement throughout every Cal State university, so that 500,000 students that are enrolled in the Cal State universities will all be exposed to the 4 major groups of ethnic studies. So I'm honored to be here with you this evening. I'm thankful for your gratitude for the things that I've done, your expression of love and support across the board, everywhere I go. But keep in mind that I'm just this kid who was in the projects of Los Angeles, in the Pueblos, who had visions and dreams because my parents believed in me. My neighborhood believed in me. My teachers believed in me. My church held me up and prayed for me every step of the way. And so I'm honored today to be recognized by you, to be given a salute to me for the work that I've done. But equally important, most recently, I've been appointed and nominated to be appointed the Secretary of State of California. I'll be the first African American to actually serve as a Secretary of State, and only the 5th to actually serve as a constitutional officer for the state of California. I'm honored. I'm sure my family is honored, but my parents, who are no longer with me, are looking down and knowing that what they did all those years, the sacrifice and support, really meant something and should mean something to California. So once again, those of you who are at the Academic Advancement Program, I want to thank you for having me with you. I want you to know that I was an advancement student as a GAP student many years ago, and that I'm eternally grateful to the University of California and the people of California for giving me a chance to be a professional, a chance to make a difference, but a chance to also change the trajectory of my life and the life of my family. And I hope in some way, the small way, that all the legislation I have done, that has been groundbreaking legislation for the last 8 years, will mean a lot to the people of California, and that I have earned your respect and that I've paid forward. Have a wonderful conference, and thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you. We really appreciate the words of Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, and we thank her for sharing that message with us and look forward to working with her on her new role as Secretary of State for the state of California. So at this moment, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, and I'm going to do a short introduction because her biography is quite long and extensive, but there's some good things that you should know about her. Elaine Brown is a former leader of the Black Panther Party, Minister of Information, and Chairman. She's the author of A Taste of Power and The Condemnation of Little B. The Taste of Power, her autobiography, was optioned in 2017 by Robbie Brennan Productions for production of a feature film slated to start filming this year in 2021 with distribution by Netflix, and will be published as a new audiobook in 2021 as well. Elaine is Executive Director of the Michael Lewis Legal Defense Committee, supporting the legal appeal of Lewis Little B, who was arrested in 1997 in Atlanta, Georgia, at the age of 13 for a murder he did not commit. And he was convicted and sentenced as an adult to life in prison, where he remains. An extraordinary motion for a new trial is actually pending. Elaine is also CEO of the nonprofit organization Oakland and World Enterprises, Incorporated, dedicated to launching and sustaining for-profit businesses for cooperative ownership by formerly incarcerated and other people facing extreme barriers to economic survival. The organization recently acquired a 3/4 acre property in West Oakland, California, where it has established its first business, an urban farm, and is developing the property further for other businesses in 79 100% affordable housing units projected for 2021 groundbreaking. Elaine is a lead organizer of the $27 billion Hunter Point Shipyard community lawsuit, seeking justice for thousands of predominantly Black residents in the area exposed to nuclear toxins at the infamous Superfund site. Elaine has another aspect of her life that not many people may not know, but she studied classical piano for many years, including the Philadelphia Conservatory of Music, and has recorded 2 albums of original songs, one for Motown Records, and Elaine is currently has her papers archived at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. So everyone along with me, please welcome Elaine Brown.
I want to thank you, Dr. Alexander and Ms. Shante Henderson and the AAP for continuing this important commemoration of the lives and the legacies of Black Panther Party leaders Alprentice, Bunchy Carter, and John Huggins, who were assassinated at Campbell Hall 52 years ago now. As you know, the Academic Advancement Program grew out of the High Potential Program, in which Bunchy and John were enrolled in 1969. And we must recognize that their deaths at Campbell Hall and what they fought for established the AAP as a legacy for Black and other students of color at UCLA. The primary goal of the Black Panther Party, which was founded in 1966, was to create the conditions for the liberation of Black people and, by right and reason, all other oppressed people. The first point of our 10-point platform and program was, we want freedom, power to determine the destiny of our Black communities. As party founder Huey P. Newton stated, the party was a Marxist-Leninist organization. Our fundamental ideology, therefore, was creation of an egalitarian society, eliminating poverty and racism and all forms of oppression and exploitation of human beings and nature itself, toward a distribution of wealth and resources according to ability and need. We engaged in a wide range of activities toward creating the conditions for this revolutionary change, from sponsoring our well-known social service programs, which we called survival programs, operating under the slogan survival pending revolution, like our free breakfast for children programs and our free clinics, to addressing police brutality in word and deed, from our early armed community patrols to defending our persons from our homes and offices and so forth against police assaults, to creating model institutions like our school and affordable housing. By 1968, the Black Panther Party had been identified by the FBI as, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, unquote. We were essentially the terrorists of our time. The entire government, led by the FBI and its director, J. Edgar Hoover, primarily through its COINTELPRO program, targeted the Black Panther Party for elimination. The FBI directive was to, quote, discredit, disrupt, or destroy the Black Panther Party. It's important to note that 1969 was slated by Hoover himself to be the last year of the Panther. In early 1968, while party founder and Minister of Defense Huey P. Newton was in jail awaiting trial on charges of killing an Oakland cop and the accompanying Free Huey movement was exploding all over the nation, the party's first chapter, the Southern California chapter, was organized by Bunchy Carter, formerly head of one of the largest street organizations in America, the 5,000-strong LA-based Slawsons. When I joined that chapter in April 1968 on the heels of the King assassination and the first police murder of a Panther, little Bobby Hutton in Oakland, Ericka Huggins was my captain. Bunchy was the head of the chapter as Deputy Minister of Defense, and John Huggins soon became the chapter's deputy chairman. Later that year, Bunchy, John, party member Geronimo Pratt, and I enrolled in UCLA's new high potential program. By the end of 1968, the FBI was in full battle mode to destroy the Black Panther Party in 1969. Our Southern California chapter would come to bear the brunt of that campaign. The LAPD formed the nation's first SWAT team for the express purpose of wiping out the chapter. Hundreds of SWAT team members assaulting our offices in LA in December of '69, only days after the FBI orchestrated assassinations of Illinois Party Chapter Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton and member Mark Clark. Indeed, during 1969, the Southern California chapter suffered the police murder of at least one member, or nearly one member, a month, and one of our former members, Chip Fitzgerald, who was imprisoned that year, remains in prison to this very day. Beyond academics, the party members at UCLA operated under the slogan, educate to liberate. Among other things, we pushed to get rid of the CIA recruiting office that was on campus at the time. We supported and directed anti-war activity. We supported the resurrection of the Black Student Union. We secured food from Wayburn Hall's dormitory for our free food program in South Central LA. The so-called conflict that culminated on January 17, 1969 then must be seen in this context: the FBI's targeting of the Black Panther Party. There is no such FBI record relating to Ron Karenga or his organization at all. This was about discrediting and destroying the Black Panther Party. Whatever vignettes others claim about January 17th, I bear witness that John Huggins was shot in the back by a member of Karenga's US organization in an FBI operation, and that when Bunchy Carter turned toward the shooter, he was shot by the same person in the chest. There are no alternative facts. There is no other story. Ongoing COINTELPRO scenarios that are being put out there are just that. This was not about control of a Black studies program, for the Black Panther Party had no agenda for that. There was no money promised to the party by the then Chancellor to create such a program. We advanced no person to head such a program. Our only position was that it be student control. Today, I think it's critical that we all understand that the government's agenda to destroy the Black Panther Party has left us in a neoliberal vacuum. No matter the rallies for Black Lives Matter, the anti-police marches, there is no organized freedom movement for Black people in America today. No organized revolutionary agenda. Yet Black people remain oppressed. We have the highest poverty rates, the highest cancer and coronavirus death rates, the lowest education levels. Only 1% of all business revenues are from Black businesses, and we represent nearly half the prison population of America. This commemoration, this celebration, the first of which I am proud to have assisted in developing, was co-founded and begun by two UCLA students in 2008, Sekunder Iqbal and Kendra Arsenault. The purpose was to celebrate, to educate, to liberate. One of the goals was to change the name of Campbell Hall to Carter Huggins Hall. That was 13 years ago now. So if we would celebrate the lives and legacies of these two heroes, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, let us get back to the freedom agenda. Let us no longer be distracted by the identity agenda, where the individual identity and persona is more important than the freedom of our people. And let us move to create a new social structure where poverty, racism, and human exploitation are eliminated. For today, this day, though, let us pledge to fulfill the promise of the first commemoration to rename Campbell Hall Carter Huggins Hall, lest we forget. All power to the people, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine, for those powerful remarks. And all I can say is amen. You know, that was on point, and I appreciate you being with us this evening. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ericka Huggins. Ericka is an educator, leading Black Panther Party member, former political prisoner, human rights advocate, and poet. For 45 years, Ericka has lectured in the United States and internationally on restorative practices and the role of spiritual practice in creating social change. Ericka was a professor of sociology and African American studies from 2008 through 2015 in the Peralta Community College District and then California State University's East Bay in San Francisco. Ericka is a racial equity workshop and learning lab facilitator for World Trust Educational Services. She curates conversations focused on the individual and collective work of becoming equitable in our daily lives as well as the workplace. Additionally, she facilitates workshops on the importance of self-care, and we are so happy and glad to have you as part of this program this evening. Ericka Huggins.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. And thank you, Shantae, for all of your organizing work. Thank you to the people who have gathered this evening that I cannot see. Thank you so much for being here. And Secunda, if you are out there, thank you, thank you, thank you for being one of the first organizers, as Elaine said. Thank you, Masai, for being such a champion for this memorial over the years. And thank you to Councilwoman Weber, who is not here, but was here. Her presence is here. So thank you, Chancellor Block, for your not only kind words, but very pertinent to the times that we're living in. Tonight, I'll reflect on legacy. So much happened for each of us before we were born, and we are a multi-generational gathering. So much history precedes us, precedes me. And each year at UCLA, we come together to celebrate the lives of John and of Bunchy. Here on this campus, it's a virtual campus right now. And I know that their families who are here tonight and those who cannot be with us remember and celebrate their dear ones, not once a year, but every day. And tomorrow, on January 15th, the world celebrates the birth and the life of a human rights leader, Martin Luther King. And as we reflect on the years since the assassination of Martin Luther King, of John and Bunchy, we are forced to make connections between the government forces at play on the UCLA campus on January 17th, 1969, on the balcony at the Lorraine Hotel, where Martin was killed, on the stage at the Audubon Ballroom, where Malcolm X was killed, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And in this very world that we're living in now, these same forces that long ago promised to wipe us out, as Elaine said, and any movement for justice and freedom, and neutralize its leaders by, quote, any means necessary. There were no accidental deaths, not then or now. no crazed gunmen and jealous zealots. This is all hanging on the scaffolding of structural racism and inequity. John and Bunchy's murders were orchestrated. And looking back at it now, I see so were the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna and Ahmaud, and all the way back to Denzel Dowell, and all the way forward into the time we're in. What do I mean? I mean that these deaths are the result of allowing for institutional, structural harm, hatred, and division. John was originally from New Haven, Connecticut, and he stood out as a champion of humanity then and wherever he went in his short 23 years of life. He envisioned a world where healthcare and education were not considered a privilege, but a human right, where the focus on self-defense meant that we reclaim land, bread, housing, clothing, justice, and peace. John reminded me often that in connection with one another and community, we can change the conditions of thousands, millions of people at a grassroots level. John and I drove from New York City to California to join the Black Panther Party because we believed that the party was at the vanguard of that change. And the lives that John touched were transformed by his kindness, his loyalty, his brilliance, his compassion. For John, the principle that he loved was educate to liberate. It was not a slogan for him. It is his legacy. Within months after arriving in California, we met Alprentice Bunchy Carter, a man of keen intuition, awareness of the power of people to make change. He was a leader among men. During his incarceration as a so-called gang leader, Bunchy used that confinement to read, and he turned his brilliant mind toward both African and African-American history. He located a path to freedom for himself, and so for many young Black men and women, a social pathway, a political pathway, a spiritual pathway to freedom. Once he learned something, he taught it. For Bunchy, each one teach one was not a quote. It is his legacy. These two young Black leaders from different coasts and life experiences, together with party members in all of the 40 chapters in the United States and many more around the world, helped to build and maintain community programs across the US to secure all of the human rights of African American people and of brown people and of indigenous people, of immigrant people, of women, and so on. As UCLA students, John and Bunchy raised student consciousness about the needs in communities outside of the campus. Yes, the campus is a community, but there is a world beyond it. And it is the need even more so today for our attention. In 2021, we are experiencing once again the feeling of waking up in a raging fire. Well, maybe I don't, because there have been so many fires in my life. However, many of us are awakening to something for the first time. All of us are under the threat of COVID-19, the loss of homes, the loss of jobs, the loss of life, the loss of education as we know it. And we're waking up to the recognition that decades of preparation preceded this January 6th in my hometown, Washington, D.C. No accidents. Now, some of us are surprised to be looking at the possibilities, ones that have been raised with government sanctioned violence. The possibilities that all of the things that we've been seeing have been orchestrated. That's a sad thing. But there is an intention behind our world as we see it today. And people, we can change it. We can change it. A campus can be a location for intellectual growth, skills development, and critical thinking. If university halls and rooms are used properly, they can be the location of change within us and in our world. But that's not the only location for change. Once again, we are all being called to action regardless of our age. And if we have privilege and power, we are really being called to action. And that doesn't only come with skin privilege. It's multi-layered. So a leader, and you can be a leader of any age, a leader always focuses on the ground at his or her feet, simultaneously keeping the horizon in clear sight. John and Bunchy were clear-sighted, compassionate, sensitive to the needs of all communities and the global impact of movements to uplift the forgotten and the ignored. Today, as we commemorate them, I think what action I can take in my community to honor them. What more action? Can you think like that? We can adopt their legacies, educate to liberate. We can adopt their legacy, each one teach one. And we can think about the multi-generations now and to come. In this era of multiple pandemics, a virus that attacks the body and a virus that attacks the soul, what do we do? How will we make our voices heard at decision-making tables, in rooms where our skills and unique ways of being are fully appreciated and welcomed? We've got to do some work. There is a lot of work to do. So ask yourselves, each of you, students, faculty, administrators, chancellors, friends, activists, artivists, what legacy beyond UCLA are you leaving for your world, for the generations to come? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ericka, for those resounding words, very passionate words that you share with us this evening. We appreciate it so deeply. At this time, I'd like to ask the audience to prepare to place questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom platform instead of the chat. I don't think the chat's working anyways. And I would also like to call forward Masai Mentors, who is a retired director of AAP, but we still employ him in many ways, paid and non-paid. But thank you, Masai, for agreeing to serve as a moderator this evening to field questions and to direct questions as well to our guests. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. And thanks everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Elaine, for your fiery words. And thank you, Ericka, for your words of optimism. You know, I've been with AAP since 1994, almost 25 years. But I've been associated with UCLA as a high potential student since 1969, 70. So I've been around the campus for a very long time. But I say all that to say that these events are really the highlight of my year every year. I get a chance to bring these energies back together. I just get a chance to connect with you, Ericka, and with you, Elaine, my dear friends, and we resurrect this every year. So I look forward to it, and I'm glad we're doing it again today. Again, as Dr. Alexander mentioned to the audience, please, if you got questions, pop them into the chat. There's a question about the renaming of Campbell Hall. I'll come back to that in a second. Sikander, my friend, good to see you in the room. Seconder Iqbal is one of the former AAP student, and he's a hardworking activist, and I know him very well. He's going to take the first question. And his question is, hello, my name is Seconder Iqbal. I was one of the founding organizers of the Bunchy Carter and John Huggins commemoration back in 2008. It has now been 13 years since our commemoration. Why hasn't the building name been changed to Carter Huggins Hall? And I want to know what the students will be able to push, if the students, when the students will be able to push this through. I hope Chancellor Block is still in the room because again, this question has been bouncing around for a very long time, Ever since I've been on campus, there have been discussions about the need to rename the building. In 2010, students put together a really slick, glossy, beautiful petition for the university requesting that they make the name change. And the university denied and really just ignored that petition. Last year, we put together a petition with Move On. We got over 6,000 signatures, students and the community and folks associated with the party and with AP are waiting with bated breath for this name change. And I also understand there was a naming committee, campus renaming committee that met late last year, was reconvening in January. So if anyone can kind of contribute to our understanding of where we stand with the renaming and if that's something that we can do, or any thoughts about that at all, please feel free to share. And Santiago, I see you had the very same question in the chat. Thanks for being here, Santiago. Comments and thoughts or feelings, or maybe from the Chancellor about your thoughts, sir, about renaming the building.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So as you pointed out, we've created this year a naming committee with quite a diverse representation of stakeholders on campus, but they're really just the committee. They'll be soliciting recommendations, and this is hopefully now going to be a thoughtful process of, it's a naming and unnaming committee, and it's looking across campus, it's looking for naming opportunities. So I can't get ahead of the committee here other than to say that I think we have a process, and I think students are going to provide input to it, and it'll move forward in that manner. In the name, of course, the building has a name already, I think named after someone, and that's always an issue about removing names from buildings also becomes significant issues. So the naming committee is going to be receiving input from students, from faculty, from stakeholders everywhere, and hopefully moving through with deliberate action on naming and unnamings of buildings.
Thank you so much, sir, for even addressing the question.
Just a minute, Masai. Addressing the question, we've been asking the same question for 13 years. So to be grateful for a naming committee, that means that one of the things I learned from Willie Brown, who's one of the best and slickest politicians I know, and I can say that because I know Willie Brown, is whenever you don't want to get something done, you put it in a committee. So you had what does it take to rename the building? This building was arbitrarily named after a woman who was an English teacher or some kind of librarian. It had no particular name. We've been doing this for 13 years. So committee, I find that to be not an answer to a question, but if anything, I'd like to know who's on the committee and what year the committee is planning on to say that this will be offensive. We have people tearing down statues in buildings all day long around the country. We're not talking about that. We're simply saying this has to be named after these two people. We've been doing this for 13 years, but they've been dead for 52 years. You should be ashamed to be even in Campbell Hall. And so you can resurrect something better and different by renaming this building. So I find that unacceptable, quite frankly, and I'm sorry if this is contentious, but this is where we are.
Yes, please, again, happy to we'll send you the names of the committee members and the charge of the committee.
Thank you, Chancellor Paul. Other questions in the chat? Why is it important, and Ericka, maybe you can take this one. Why is it important to acknowledge today, this day, especially for current AAP students?
That's a great question. Thank you to the person who asked it. And it's important because literally, it could be you. I don't mean that in a horror-inducing way. I'm saying that John and Bunchy were simply doing what is necessary on the campus to uplift Black and Brown students. That's how High Potential program began, as a way for Black and Brown students to navigate the UCLA campus world. So for them to be killed, and Elaine, thank you for saying this was orchestrated by the FBI's counterintelligence program, a clandestine gangster organization within the FBI. So when you stand up for good, you can be named, given a name, militant, terrorist. And so it's important to know that these two men were thinking not of themselves, but for all of the Black and Brown students, all of the students in general on the UCLA, but not just UCLA, all of the UC campuses, not just the campuses, but every community from which people of color, or as we say these days, BIPOC, come. And all the people who are supporting us to be on a campus. The very first student at UCLA had to take his classes in something like a closet because he was Black. So why is this important? Because we want to make certain that we are paving a way or making a way with our very bodies, minds, hearts, and souls for students who would not be at UCLA to be at UCLA, and to stand strong and firm in the fact that there are still places in these United States where Black students and Brown students, Indigenous students are not wanted. So it is more a universal kind of understanding of why the day is important. No one should be killed who lives their life for freedom and justice. No one. And if you look at history, you'll see that many of us were killed. And I say us because I always thought during that period of time that I could die at any moment. And Elaine, I'm sure you felt the same way. And then why else is it important? Where did Bunchy get his education? He educated himself. He transformed himself in prison, and California builds the most prisons in the United States, and the United States builds the most prisons in the world. And who's in them? Black and Brown people. So it's important for us to look at John and Bunchy as examples, not as icons, as real living human examples, and take their example into our own beings and walk forward.
You know,
Thank you very much for that.
I would like to just give a quick sentence onto that.
Please do, please do.
Every single thing that has happened, every small advance that Black people have made, like the vote in the 1965 Voting Rights Act, was purchased with blood. So let's not get it twisted. You didn't get the AAP because somebody was benevolent one day and just decided they were going to help you. It is this blood of John and Bunchy that forced this university to begin to carry on what was a small program, a high potential program, meaning people who had high potential but couldn't get into UCLA. And subsequently it has evolved. But everything we did, I always tell people, Fannie Lou Hamer lost her eye so that we could get the vote. People walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge so we could vote. And we not sure how that vote works these days, but bottom line is that people went through hell to get the 1964 Civil Rights Bill passed. And those are the two biggest pieces of legislation since slavery ended. So when we look at this, the children that have gone through the AAP program, for which we're very happy, Black, brown, other people of color, people who have been marginalized in so many different ways, poor people who couldn't afford to come to UCLA, or people who couldn't figure it out. It is that is part of the direct legacy that created, it was that blood that created this legacy that is being lived right now. So I just wanted to mention that, because everything is not, this wasn't done because there was a benevolence, but because there was a struggle for education.
Yes, we fought for this. Thank you. And that question was from Jackie Sims. Thank you so much, Jackie, former AAP and veteran. Many of the questions, I should add, we've got 30 plus questions in the Q&A. More than 80% of them are about the renaming. So Chancellor Bach, there's a lot of interest in this renaming. But I'm going to move on, and I'm going to switch reels. There's an interesting question here from Yesenia. And because we've got these such powerful and astute women in this panel, the question is, thank you for the speakers, especially the women. What is it like to be a powerful woman in the many fields that you have worked in? What have been some of the obstacles, and how have you overcame them?
Can you, Masai, can you tell us the name of the person who asked the question? Is that okay?
Sure, Yesenia is her name.
It's a woman? How do you know it's a woman?
It's a guess, my bad. Yesenia Aguilar.
Oh, that's that, you know, we know who that is. That's our brother. We know him. So I want to say this, because people ask me all the time, what was it like to be a woman in the Black Panther Party, as though we were some kind of an oppressed group and not revolutionaries ourselves. Ericka Huggins, as I told you, when I joined the Black Panther Party, was my captain. I took orders directly from her, and she had been assigned that role to do that. And until Bunchy and John, until John was killed, and she had to go back to New Haven to take John's body with her 3-week-old baby. I make note who is on this line, Miss Mai Huggins. So happy about that. Just adore her. She's my other little daughter. There were plenty of issues regarding women in the party, but I never knew of any women in leadership in things like the NAACP, SNCC, or any of these other organizations. So it's always curious to me why people think there's a special thing about women in the party. There are issues that we face as Blacks and as women, but one of the things I'd like to just say to this, and then I'm finished, is that at no time do I think gender gave us any particular role when we were picking cotton for 250 years in the fields of Georgia. I believe we were all slaves. And it didn't even matter if you were gay or straight. It didn't matter if you were tall or short. It didn't matter if you were old or young. But if you were in the field, you had to deliver. And so for 250 years, our people suffered in the cotton fields of Georgia and the rice paddies of South Carolina and the tobacco fields of Virginia to produce the economy that this country is running on, for which we have not one benefit. So I think the focus for me is, as a woman, and I just really get angry when, I have to deal with day-to-day chauvinism and all kinds of things that men do. But at the end of the day, I see Black men as a partner with me, because Black men are not in charge of anything. They may think they are, but they're not in charge of anything in America. And so I would say that the most important thing for us to do is to unite our people around our common interests and be careful not to get too far involved in a sort of what I call a bourgeois feminist polemic. Thanks.
Another question, one more. From Akello Stone. Do you feel that social media has greatly desensitized today's college students to the atrocities that continue to be committed against African-American people? What countermeasures do you think might turn this around? Tough question, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the impact of social media and what's happening to us all today.
One of the things that I learned when I was incarcerated and separated from my daughter was that it's important to reframe everything that comes our way. So if social media can be a source of desensitizing or overwhelming with information, then we can use social media to our advantage. We can make a choice to do things with it that have not yet been done. It's a really wonderful set of resources for getting the word out. It's a wonderful set of resources for telling the truth. I really think that, anybody can have a podcast and it can be promoted anywhere. Anybody can do Instagram Live or Facebook Live and use it to uplift what I can't think of. I'm sure that students can. I believe in young people, in their absolute ability to pull apart the same old, and find the new and revolutionary thing that can be done. It's happening all the time. And so I would suggest to the person who asked the question and everyone listening, do it. Use it differently rather than just critiquing and gossiping and or paying attention to the small things. Create something big that is supported by social media, and instead of blaming it. Now, and being careful of what you choose to do in these times. And I say that in the name of community safety. So I hope that what I've said makes sense. And thank you for that question. And thank you for all of the questions that we won't get to this evening.
Elaine, maybe you can comment on that. And also before we go, I wanted you to comment on your freedom agenda. You mentioned that in your talk, because you and I talked the other day about reimagining. I know we've only got about 4 minutes left, but say a word again about the freedom agenda and how we can use these moments to reimagine where we're going, what our trajectory is.
Well, reimagine is not a word I like to use too much. Freedom, in other words, this seems sort of pedestrian. And I just want to comment on, I just want to agree with Ericka. If we had Facebook, could you imagine what we could have done back? We were rolling out stuff on a, what do you call that thing? What was that thing? We rolled out some stuff. We were hand typing stuff.
Stenograph machine.
Yes.
Wrong thing. But, I remember having a typewriter in the basement of John and Ericka's house. And we were so happy because we got an electric typewriter. We were jumping up and down over an electric typewriter. If we had had social media, I can't imagine what we might have been able to do with that. So we have to see it, we have to be able to use what we got to get what we need, as we used to say. So I want to thank Ericka for not, people have this tendency to condemn this and say it's no good. Well, you can make it good. So, on the question of freedom, I mean, it's too much to talk about in 1 minute or 2 minutes. If I had the answer, then we wouldn't be even worrying about this conversation. We'd all be free, everybody be happy. But the bottom line is that we are an oppressed people, Black people. Right behind us, Latinos and Native Americans living like dogs on reservations. I mean, this is just the reality. Black women in the world are the poorest people in the world. Of any group of people in the world, Black women are the poorest. Not Black women in America only, but we're also at the very bottom. We have more jobs and make less money. We have more businesses than many people make less money. So there are these ills that we know are out there. People living homelessness, people living in a car with their children. I mean, how many things can we name? So if we start looking at this stuff, it'll get overwhelming, but we have to make a decision that there is a systemic issue here, as Ericka and I have tried to point out, that we learned from the Black Panther Party and in the Black Panther Party, is that this wasn't done. This didn't just happen. This is 250 years of slavery that built up this country's economy, shifting to industrial base because of the buildup of cotton, as Karl Marx said. Without cotton, there would have been no industry, and without slaves, there'd have been no cotton. Now, if we don't understand that arc and how we got here, then we start thinking, well, if I could just get a job, everything would be all right. If I could just do this, that would be all right. If we could just get the healthcare, all of these things are interconnected. So what we need though is young people to get galvanized, not to be comfortable at UCLA because you got a place at UCLA. UCLA is not the end of the world. You don't need a PhD. You know, James Baldwin, I don't think even had a college degree. Now, I've been to 3 colleges and 1 law school and don't have a degree. And I've probably 2 books. So my point is, what is it that you want to do? As Ericka suggested, what is your legacy you want to leave? What is it you want to do in this span of time that you might live? We all thought we were going to be dead by 30, merely 25. But I was already 25 when Bunchy and John were killed. I was the age of Bunchy, 26. And so we have to decide what you want to do with your life. But we need to get organized and make an agenda that says that this is not working for all of us. And if it's not working for all of us, we don't really want it. The economic disparity is absolutely shameful. The technology companies have done no different than the big industrial companies. The gap is widening. What is it that you want? You just want to be a lawyer? That's all you want to do, and you just be happy being a lawyer? Or you want to just make your contribution by having a food kitchen or a garden somewhere? I mean, we all, we can do all of those things, but let's make an agenda for ourselves that goes to changing this fundamental system that is never going to yield fairness and equity for anybody but the few that are ruthless enough to get over the rest and become president of the United States or president of the Hoobie Boo tech company or whatever it is. We have to get organized, but we have to have an understanding that the agenda is that we can't stay where we are in this scheme of things. This scheme is evil. It is never going to allow for anything because it requires exploitation. We have to decide we want a different world and a better world where all of us have the things we need and in some cases the things we want.
Thank you so much. That's the message I wanted to hear from you, Elaine. So much again, Ericka and Elaine, thank you so much. We're out of time. I've got to turn it back over to Dr. Alexander. Thanks for the questions. A lot of fire in the questions, a lot of fire in the audience. Thank you all for coming. Dr. Ray, you're back to go.
Thank you, Masai, for moderating that session. And thank you, Elaine and Ericka, again, for those powerful words and messages that you've shared and you continue to share, with our students. And in fact, I've been thinking this is our 50th anniversary. This is not hopefully the last time we invite you back. We want you back to do something else for the 50th anniversary, since you've been such contributors and such historic people to make what we have a legacy here at UCLA because of John Huggins and Alprentice Bunchy Carter. So thank you so much again. I'd like to conclude our program. If we were on campus in Campbell Hall, we would actually at this point be marching out to the infamous rock that we have in front of Campbell Hall, and we would be involved in a candlelight vigil paying tribute and having a moment of silence for the 2 slain soldiers that we honored tonight. But we can't do that. But if you don't mind, just in your own way, do a moment of silence for these two young men and pray that, we continue to be strong in the struggle and that we continue to fight. And all of you who join us tonight, 150 strong, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate you tuning in on this Zoom. And again, the 50th anniversary events for UCLA, for AAP, you'll see them throughout the year. And I just want to say thank you again, and Godspeed, and God bless everyone.
Well,
good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Ericka.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Ericka.
Good night.
Thanks, Cassie. And Urel in the back.
And Urel, thank you.